Okay, class, now that we have gone over what we think we know about the branches of government, we're now going to dive deep into what the branches of government actually are. So hopefully that Schoolhouse Rock video got you guys going, but now we're going to go more in depth. So this is the standard that our unit is focused on, describe the elements of the representative democracy republic in the United States. But today we're going to focus on describing the three branches of government of national government: executive, legislative, and judicial. Alright, so there's three branches of government like I just mentioned. The first one is legislative. The legislative makes the laws. Everybody repeat, makes laws. Makes laws. Good job, guys. Okay, our second branch of government is the executive branch. And the executive branch enforces the laws. So this means they make sure everybody is following all the rules. And then the third branch is the judicial branch, which evaluates the laws, meaning they make sure that all the laws are still up to standard and fits in with everything in day-to-day life. All right, so the first branch of government that we're going to cover is the executive branch. Yay! Okay, next, in the executive branch, the president is the head. So you guys probably know the president right now. Everybody talks about presidents, and for the United States, the president is the head. But they're not the only one who gets to make decisions in the executive branch. Although they are the head, there's also the vice president, who is under them, and the cabinet. And the cabinet is filled with a lot of different departments, like the Department of Transportation, the Department of Education, all these different things, all which help the president make decisions that are best for our country. All right, so powers of the president. The president makes treaties, so they make agreements with other countries, and that must be approved by the Senate, and we'll talk more about who the Senate is later. The president also appoints judges and ambassadors, so people who represent our country and go to people who administer trials and all that sorts of fun stuff. Presidents also call Congress into session during extraordinary occasions. Presidents enforce laws, like I mentioned, so they make sure everybody's following the rules, and they can veto bills. And we'll talk more about bills later, but basically, if they want to pass a bill, the president can veto it and say that he doesn't want it to pass. He or she doesn't want it to pass. The president supports legislation, issues executive orders, and grants pardons to the federal offenders. All right, next we have the legislative branch. All right, the legislative branch is split into two different groups. The first is the House of Representatives, and the second is the Senate. Neither one of these are better than the other. They're both different and do different things for our country, but together they make up the Congress. All right, now we'll see what is different between these two. All right, House of Reps versus the Senate. The House of Reps, the number of representatives for a state depends on your size of state. So the bigger states get a lot of representatives, while the smaller states only get a few. Each state has at least one though. In the House of Representatives, you are on term for 2 years, and you are required to be at least 25 years old, be a U.S. citizen for the past 7 years, and live in the state you represent. Some special duties of the House of Representatives is they recommend tax bills to become laws, and they decide if a government official should be put on trial before the Senate if he or she has committed a crime. The Senate, on the other hand, is considered equal representation between a state. So there are 2 people from every single state that represent them. So that means there's 100 total. And they're on term for 6 years. And you're required to be at least 30 years old, be a U.S. citizen for the past 9 years, and live in the state you represent. Some special duties of the Senate are you vote on treaties the president makes, you review and approve who the president appoints, and you hold trial for a government official who does something wrong. All right, this branch, the legislative branch, has the power to check or limit the president's powers. Some powers of Congress. They create bills that are then turned into laws. They can override a president's veto. So like I mentioned before, the president has the power to turn down a bill, but if the president turns down a bill, if 2/3 of the Congress, so over half of the Congress, says actually we still want it to pass, it can still pass. Congress confirms or rejects presidential appointments and treaties. The Congress can declare war, and they can impeach the president. So if the president did something really, really bad, or people begin to not approve, the Congress can say, you can no longer be president. All right, and the last branch, the judicial branch. Okay, so the Supreme Court is the highest court system. The Supreme Court hears cases that have made their way through the lower court system, but still need a decision to be made, and there's some challenge with it. There are more than 7,500 cases sent to the Supreme Court each year. Only about 80 to 100 cases are actually accepted, so obviously the Supreme Court can only deal with so much because they're big, heavy cases that are hard decisions to make. So there are 9 Supreme Court justices, one of the 9 being the Chief Justice, and the justices of the Supreme Court are appointed by the President, approved by the Senate, and can serve for life. So, as you can see in this last point here, appointed by the President, approved by the Senate, and served for life. This is an example of how all 3 branches work together in some cases, and no one branch is greater than the other, but they all check each other and work together for the greater good of our country. All right, some powers of the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court decides if laws are constitutional and legal, declares acts from the President and Congress as unconstitutional, and hears cases whose rulings in lower courts have been challenged. Now our time to practice on our own. I hope you guys were listening as I went through this PowerPoint and gave you some new information about the 3 branches of government. I would like you guys in your journal to copy down this chart, and you're going to fill in as much as you can. So, for the executive, judicial, and legislative branch, I want to tell you what they do for laws. So remember we talked about some enforce laws, some make laws, some evaluate. Tell me which one does which. And we're going to see who the head or the highest in each branch is. This can be a trick question. It can be 2. Remember, it's split. You're going to list the 3 powers, or not only 3. Each branch has more than 3, but you're going to see if you can list 3 powers that this branch has. And then you're going to tell me any extra information you think is important and that you might have learned from this PowerPoint. All right, so work quietly by yourselves and fill out this chart, and then we'll have an activity afterwards.